Mr. Jonathan Sacerdoti. He is a British broadcaster and foreign policy expert and kind enough to join us right here on the Live Zone. Jonathan, good afternoon, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you.
So, Jonathan, let's jump right into this. In this case, I want to talk about what's happening over in Ireland. The Israeli embassy now closed, and Israel actually blaming it on extreme anti-Israel policies. What's behind this?
Israel's decision to close its embassy in Dublin reflects escalating tensions over Ireland's stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And it comes following Ireland's formal support for South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice, which accuses Israel of genocide in Gaza. That's the crime of crimes. Now, many say, of course, that those allegations are not justified. Israel vehemently denies them. And Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar labelled Ireland's actions as anti-Semitic, asserting that they cross all red lines in bilateral relations. So that's why they've chosen to close down the embassy there. But in response, the Irish officials, including Prime Minister Simon Harris, expressed disappointment over the closure. But remember, this case in the ICJ will need to cross a very hard line where they need to prove Israel has direct and documented intent to conduct genocide. That's going to be very difficult because compared to real genocides throughout history, there is no such proof, there is no such action, there is no such plan, there is no such intent. But Ireland, in joining this case, has almost suggested that they would like genocide to be redefined just so that Israel could be found guilty.
Yeah, to play devil's advocate here, we know that 52 Palestinians and more than 200 were wounded in the last 24 hours. More than 45,000 Palestinians killed in Israel's war on Gaza. Yet again, many are suggesting this is proof that genocide is occurring.
Well, again, those figures, of course, that you're quoting are issued by the Hamas forces in Gaza, and they don't include any combatants. So that just should give you an idea of the accuracy of those numbers. Israel argues that even if those numbers are accurate, it's killed a vast number of militants, of Hamas terrorists, and that the ratio of combatants to civilians is actually far superior to similar urban warfare situations which the US and the UK, for example, have engaged in. Indeed, we'll have to wait and see as the numbers become clearer over time exactly what that ratio will be. And there is no doubt that there is suffering and death in the Gaza Strip. Nobody's denying that. However, it needs to be pointed out that those statistics are internally inconsistent. A report published just yesterday in the United Kingdom has shown that those statistics, when analysed by statisticians, objectively are internally inconsistent, with numbers not adding up when the different categories are combined, women, children, etc. Also, as I said, no account for combatants or indeed natural deaths or other causes of death that have nothing to do with the war. For example, many of the rockets that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have launched themselves on Israel fall short in the Gaza Strip and indeed cause casualties there. So the statistics that are being quoted are not necessarily accurate and certainly aren't adequate for proof under international law of genocide.
Very good, sir. Let's move on to Syria. In this case, we now know that Assad speaking out saying he denies that he actually planned to leave Syria. He said he wanted to stay and fight. He also says he was evacuated to Russia from an airbase in Syria on the evening of December the 8th as it came under drone attacks after leaving Damascus the morning with opposition fighters closing in. Any truth to this, sir?
Well, Assad has made this statement now. He had difficulty publishing it anywhere, actually, and in the end had to publish it himself. He stated that he left Damascus on December 8th as opposition forces closed in, moving to the Russian-operated airbase in Latakia. Upon arrival, that base was under drone attack and Syrian forces had collapsed, prompting Russian military personnel to facilitate his immediate evacuation to Russia. Now, Assad's emphasized that he said he had no intention of resigning or seeking refuge until faced with those circumstances. His regime was overthrown by insurgent forces led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and that ended his family's 5-decade rule. Russian President Vladimir Putin has granted Assad asylum in Russia. But of course, what's come out since then has been some of the level of the horrors within Syria that took place under his leadership. As prisons have been opened up and liberated, gross evidence of torture and killing. outside. His was a tyrannical regime that fell. And indeed, Israel has now acted quickly to try to take out some of the capacity of Syria so that that may not fall into hands of jihadis and others who will now be taking over the state. And that is something which, again, Israel is acting swiftly to try to deter its deterrence, to try to restore its deterrence and to try to similarly bring a level of peace to the region, meaning that whoever takes over there won't necessarily be able to use the same caliber of weapons, chemical weapons and the like as the Assad regime.
It's going to be very interesting to see how all of this unfolds. We'll end with this, Jonathan, and that is back here in the States. President-elect Donald Trump earlier today holding his first news conference since re-election. We know that since he has been elected the next president of the United States, according to him, he has spoken to some 100 leaders throughout the world. With that also being said, we know that he spoke with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. According to Mr. Netanyahu, the president-elect, well, had a certain message, and that is he wanted to make sure he continued to give him support. According to Netanyahu, he also said that he needs to complete the victory. The question is, although Trump is saying he'll support him, will that actually happen?
That's one of the things about Donald Trump that perhaps many point to being one of his strengths, that he's unpredictable. But certainly he was very supportive of Israel in the past, especially when compared to, say, the Obama administration or the Biden administration. And so it's expected that he will be less split personality with Israel than the Biden administration had been. Biden, of course, was very supportive of Israel during the last 14 months of the war, but also at times really got in the way, obstructing Israel's war efforts, dragging out the war, and in fact probably costing more Palestinian and Israeli lives in the process. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that in his conversation with President-elect Trump, he talked about how Israel was delivering a tough blow against Hamas and Hezbollah, and he emphasized the need to complete its victory. And while the specific details of that conversation do remain undisclosed, it is anticipated that the incoming Trump administration might adopt a more supportive stance towards Israel's security measures in the region. Remember that historically, as I said, Trump has expressed strong support for Israel, and that suggests that his administration may back Benjamin Netanyahu's decisions and efforts against these groups. He also put out that post on X, or formerly Twitter, in which he said that if the hostages that are still being held by the terrorists, the Palestinian terrorists in Gaza, aren't released by the time he takes office, there will be hell to pay. It's almost like a parent telling their children the room had better be tidied up by the time they get home. But certainly that has accelerated actions, and there is some effort now to come up with a hostage deal. It seems some are saying the most likely that there could be one in a long time. Israel has indeed dispatched negotiators to Qatar, so we need to watch this space and see what happens in relation to the hostages. If something does manifest now, it's most likely a result of the incoming Trump administration, and that will perhaps be the first victory he could chalk up in this respect.
Very interesting at times ahead, specifically surrounding the Middle East. We have been speaking with, yet again, Mr. Jonathan Sacerdoti, British broadcaster and foreign policy expert. Kind enough, sir. Thank you so much for taking time out to join us right here on the Live Zone.
Thank you.
All right.